This is The Big Breakdown, a long look back at some of the biggest stories we're covering for you at the Hidden Killers podcast and True Crime Today. This is Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski. Here now, Tony Brueski.
This is a story that starts like so many do, with something relatively ordinary. A hotel booking, a confused charge, a front desk clerk just trying to do her job. But by the end of this brief and otherwise forgettable summer shift, she'd find herself chatting with a man about knives, sheaths, and self-defense. A man who just a few months later would be arrested and accused of butchering 4 college students in the middle of the night. A man who'd become a household name associated with one of the most horrifying murder cases in recent memory. Of course, we are talking about Bryan Kohberger. This isn't the story of a crime scene or a police chase or really even the trial. This is a smaller, quieter story. It's one of those that we're learning about after the fact, one of those that we're diving deeper into as one of the many warning signs that were out there about Bryan Kohberger. But one of the many warning signs that although you may see something and you may say something, there's not a lot of you can do when something like this takes place. If there's no crime, just very, very uncomfortable, odd behavior. One may call it haunting. It is a story of an ordinary woman working an ordinary shift who found herself face to face with something off, something wrong. But at the time, it just seemed like a strange conversation with an awkward guest. I mean, think of it. You work at a hotel, you're going to get your fair share of interesting guests. This now reads like a warning, though. According to newly released police documents, Bryan Kohberger checked into a hotel in Pullman, Washington on June 30th of 2022. This was 5 months before the murders in Moscow, Idaho. He'd booked the room through Expedia. Nothing fancy, just a night at a modest hotel not far from Washington State University, where he'd just started his PhD in criminology. But he didn't arrive at that front desk like a regular guest. No casual greeting. Hey, how's the weather? Isn't this a lovely area? Smell that fresh, brisk mountain air. No polite check-in. According to the clerk on duty, a woman who happened to be training that day, nonetheless, he came in with a kind of intensity that made her immediately uneasy. He was upset, focused, and fixated on the bill. He believed she'd double-charged him. And instead of calmly asking her to look into it like a normal human being would, because most people aren't sitting behind the hotel desk going, I'm going to double charge that evil asshole over there. No. He immediately goes into it at 1,000 miles an hour. He got aggressive right away, not physically, but the kind of verbal aggression that makes the air in the room feel a little bit tighter. He demanded answers, raised his voice, insisted she'd made a mistake. Now, it turns out he wasn't entirely wrong. There had been a small billing error, and she quickly corrected it, refunded the charge, and explained the situation. Things like this happen. Most people would have calmed down and walked away. Kohberger did something a little stranger. He changed. And just like that, his demeanor flipped. The same man who'd stormed up to the desk red-faced and suddenly was being nice, friendly, approachable even. He smiled, apologized, then, like only an out of touch with reality Bryan Kohberger would do, started flirting. The woman behind the desk felt it to be a little jarring. The shift in mood was fast, too fast. One moment she was being scolded like a child. The next, she was being charmed. Or at least that's what Kohberger seemed to think he was doing in Bryan Kohberger's oh-so-charming ways. But she was trained to smile through weird encounters, so she did. She handed him his key and wished him a good night. She didn't know that she wasn't done with him yet. The next day, she saw him again, this time not at the desk. It was more casual, a hallway encounter. She greeted him, as you do as an employee of a hotel when you see a guest. Hi, have a nice day. The waffle iron is all heated up and ready for you. Instead of just saying hello or commenting on the weather, Kohberger launched into what might be one of the most bone-chilling casual conversations she's ever had and that we've heard of yet in the bizarre world of Bryan Kohberger. When she runs into him in the hallway, in passing, maybe he's going to the breakfast bar, hoping he hasn't missed it yet, because who doesn't like those hotel biscuits? No, he didn't bring up the biscuits. He didn't ask if there was a toaster, the juice selection. Were there any toppings for the yogurt? No. He talked about knives, not kitchen knives, not, hey, are there any things, are there plastic knives down there so I can spread butter on my bagel? No. Not hunting gear either. Not in passing. No, he talked about sheaths. Knife collection, self-defense weapons, as one does when passing the nice, cute hotel worker in the hallway. Gee, I wonder what this woman is into. I know, killing knives. Sheaths. Self-defense weapons. This seems like a good idea, right, Brian? And then he talked about them like someone who'd thought long and hard about the subject, like someone who wasn't just collecting for fun, but studying, analyzing, maybe even, in a weird way, fantasizing, as one does about knives. If you're fantasizing about knives, it's time to seek help. At the time, it didn't trigger alarms. Maybe it was weird, but there's a lot of weird people out there. Definitely not flirty, but weird. Wasn't dangerous, and Kohberger, as far as she knew, was just another guest passing through town. But then came November. The murders, the manhunt, the arrest. And suddenly that awkward guest with the intense eyes and the oddly specific interest in knife sheaths wasn't just a hotel memory. He was Bryan Kohberger, the man charged with stabbing 4 University of Idaho students in the early hours of November 13th, 2022. Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Madison Moog, and Kaylee Gonzalez. Killed in their home, brutally, silently, with a knife. After Kohberger's arrest, someone who had heard the clerk's story, possibly a coworker or friend, called the FBI tip line. They remembered that strange conversation about knives, the billing dispute, the name, and that call led investigators to dig up the police report and documentation. Another puzzle piece in a growing mountain of unnerving encounters and red flags and unsettling antidotes that seem so obvious in hindsight, but at the time were just the kind of things most people try to brush off as awkward, not alarming. What makes the story so disturbing is it isn't just what Kohberger said, it's how he said it. The way he flipped from aggression to charm, the way he shifted roles from the outraged customer to the casual flirt to the knife enthusiast in the hallway. It's a performance of normalcy that wasn't really normal at all. More than anything, it's the fact that this happened months before the murders, months before the country even knew who Bryan Kohberger was, long before anyone was paying attention. It begs the question, how many moments like these were there? How many people had encounters with Kohberger that they chalked up to weird vibes? Or that guy's a little off? How many red flags were out there floating in the ether before it all came crashing down in November? It makes us all think about the encounters that we have every single day with people. If you're out there in the world, especially customer service, you're dealing with all sorts of folks. And I'm sure most people who deal with that every day and deal with 20, 30, 40, 50 or more people a day, You could probably guess a few out of there might possibly be killers, will be killers, or are thinking about being a more adventurous killer down the road. And perhaps most chilling of all, if that woman at the front desk hadn't fixed his bill, what then? We're not here to suggest that a billing error would have led to a homicide in the hotel. But in a case filled with behavioral red flags, every small moment becomes a window into something much larger and darker. It wasn't just a billing dispute, it was a glimpse behind the mask. One that slipped just for a moment and then slid right back into place. We now know that Kohberger had a long-standing fascination with crime, with serial killers, with the psychology of murder. He wrote academic papers about it, studied criminal minds, asked questions about emotion and attachment, and allegedly he used all that knowledge not to understand crime, but to try to get away with one. The hotel story adds another layer to that profile, not just because of the knife talk, but because of the performance, the ability to flip personas, to try on different faces to see which one worked. He wasn't just a PhD student in criminology, he was his own case study. And he was collecting data all along. For the woman at the front desk, that encounter may have been brief. A blip on the radar, something you roll your eyes at and vent about on your lunch break. That weird guy, knife sheaths, that wild and crazy, wacky guy. But looking back, it was something far more unsettling. It was a close brush with a killer. Not when he was covered in blood, not when he was behind bars, but when he was calm, smiling, chatting casually about knives in a hotel hallway. The kind of moment that reminds you the scariest people don't always look scary. Sometimes they look like a man checking into a hotel with a duffel bag and a fake smile. Sometimes they're polite, charming even, until they're not. We don't know what Kohberger was planning that day. Maybe nothing. Maybe it was just a hotel stay, but the conversation he started, the topics he chose, and the way he made that woman feel, it sticks. Because when you look at the timeline and what came next, and who he turned out to be, that hallway conversation doesn't just feel awkward. It feels like a warning shot no one heard. Or maybe they did, but no one connected the dots until it was too late. And even if you connected the dots, what are you going to do about it? There's nothing you could have done. In the end, that's what so many of these stories have in common. They aren't full-blown crimes. They're not crimes at all. They're shadows, they're glimpses, little ruptures in a mask of normalcy. But they tell us something about who this man was before the country knew his name, before 4 students lost their lives, before a sleepy college town became the epicenter of a nightmare. Bryan Kohberger was already unraveling, and he left breadcrumbs. Some of them led straight to a front desk in Pullman, Washington, where a hotel clerk fixed a billing error, smiled through her discomfort, and tried to forget the strange man who liked to talk about knives. She doesn't forget anymore because now the world knows his name. And so does she. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section here on YouTube, if that's where you're watching us. If you're not already there, search Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski. Or find us on the podcast platforms, wherever you download podcasts. Do that same search, Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski, and you'll find us there. I really wonder how many of these little anecdotal stories exist out there. We're hearing a lot of them coming forward, and we probably will for a long time to come. All those little things, all those little breadcrumbs. No way to add them up because they're all individual, all taking place with people who don't know one another. And even if all of those people had the ability to collaborate and corroborate their stories, what could have been done? Probably nothing. Because talking about knives isn't a crime. Being weird isn't a crime. It's the acting out that makes it a crime. But what do you do when all of the signs are there? You can't do anything until they act in the night when no one is looking. That's what makes the story of Kohberger so spooky, so terrifying. Because I think we all know someone who may have those sort of tendencies or have that sort of off-putting personality that just doesn't add up. What are they capable of? And what can we do to prevent them from coming through our patio doors in the middle of the night? Tell me your thoughts in the comments.
This is Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski. Here now, Tony Brueski.
If you thought the Papa Roger saga was the only strange thread in this case, think again! Because just as the online persona fades, another battlefront opens. Inside the courtroom and behind the prison walls, on paper, Kohberger's sentencing should have closed the book. He pled guilty, waived appeals rights, case shut. Right? But the law is never that neat. Thanks to precedents like Garza versus Idaho. Even someone who signed away their right to appeal can still try to claw it back if they claim their attorney ignored a direct instruction. That's a legal crack in the door, and it has people asking, could Kohberger actually try to appeal anyway? Could he force Ann Taylor's hand, and if he did, would it go anywhere? Or just stall out in the courts? On one hand, the law seems airtight. On another, history has shown there's always some arguments to be made. And Kohberger, as we've seen, is never short of complaints. And those complaints, well, they've now shifted from the courtroom to the cell block. What we've learned since his transfer is that the so-called criminal mastermind is unraveling fast, from griping about missing nutrients on his meal tray to filing grievances over threats from inmates. Kohberger's life behind bars looks less like the controlled, calculating figure we imagined and more like a man in freefall. He's gone from cushy conditions at Latah County private cell, vegan meals, access to electronics, to the unforgiving grind of Ada County's prison population. And it shows. It raises a bigger point. What does this all mean? When someone who built his entire persona on control suddenly, when he has none. The academic who studied criminology, who obsessed over dominance, now sits in a cage where the rules are written by others and enforced by men who couldn't care less about his theories. That's not just punishment, that's psychological dismantling. Jennifer Coffindaffer, retired FBI special agent, joining us, a contributor. Let's walk this through legally. Does Kohberger have any shot at wriggling through this September 3rd window? And bigger picture, when you look at how quickly he's crumbling behind bars, what does it tell us about the man he really is compared to the myth that he tried to project? Let's get into it.
Well, essentially, there's a case called Garza versus Idaho, which I find very interesting that it was actually in Idaho. And so this is very relevant. It went up to the Supreme Court. And essentially, this fellow named Garza, he pled guilty, just like Kohberger. So the fact pattern, he wasn't a murderer, but it was the same situation. He pled guilty, he signed a plea agreement, and he waived his right to appeal. But after sentencing, Garza said to his attorney, listen, I know I waived my right, but I want you to file it anyway. And the attorney said, well, I'm not going to file it. And so this went all the way up to the Supreme Court because he sought relief saying, listen, my attorney is not fulfilling their Sixth Amendment duty because I'm asking for it to be filed whether I waived it or not. So essentially what the Supreme Court said in a nutshell was, wait a minute, you have to show that the attorney was deficient in some way and in some way didn't provide the due, what an attorney must do under the Sixth Amendment.
Sure.
And
yeah.
So
ineffective assistance of counsel is what he's trying to argue. Yeah.
Yeah. What I was trying to
That's how I do it all the time. I describe words.
Yeah. I'm describing word salad here. Sorry about that. So anyway, that is a point that at least Bryan Kohberger, he could do that. He could say, Ann Taylor, I want you to file an appeal. And if Ann Taylor says no, we could go down that same road, and I think it would end up in nowhere land, just like with Garza.
Yeah.
But the point is, it's not over until it's over. Or she could say, okay, I'm going to file one. and then we could see where that would ferret out in the court system. But it's not over until November 30th. September 3rd. That was the date, the timeline given.
How would that be ineffective assistance of I mean, it's like saying, I want to go into the bowling alley, but they're closed. The doors are closed. But I want to bowl. Well, just break the window open and go grab a ball. Like that, no one would say, well, that's an okay thing to do. It's like, these are the rules. They've already been set. We've agreed to them that this is a closed business. You can't just go in and do this. You've already said you're not going to file this. There's no avenue for you to file this anymore. Your attorney would be wasting time even making this paperwork out because you can't file it. It won't be seen. But I guess what that is saying is, well, maybe it will.
Well, and I want to make another point, which I really didn't do a good job of finishing up what happened after the original ruling. The decision was actually reversed again in a 6-3 ruling. And so the court actually held that there was a presumption of prejudice. So anyway, the court basically said that an appeal of a waiver is not absolute and does not eliminate the right to challenge the validity and fundamental claim. So this is why, from a legal standpoint, this isn't necessarily quite over. Mm-hmm. And it's just something that I think we all need to, hopefully September 4th comes and nothing happens.
Yeah. Do you think he would file an appeal at the outset of the trial after the verdict was handed down and he went away and agreed, he's not going to appeal, all that stuff. I would have said it that day, I don't think he's going to do anything. After reading all of his complaint letters and how little snowflake Bryan is thus far in prison, I would imagine he's already trying to draft an appeal himself behind bars in his little notepad there. I think he may be trying to do anything he can to get out of this setting.
Well, that's why I'm wondering if he is going to ask for this.
Yeah.
Because as you said, look at him. He's mad because he doesn't have his 6 required nutritional items on his tray or whatever to fill out the complement of milks and meats and veggies and fruits or whatever. It's unbelievable. Yeah. And I tell you, for the first time, I wonder if he is going to make it. I've never really thought about it before now, watching all these silly complaints he has. He seems like such a snowflake.
He's going to die. Yeah. I mean, he's not going to survive in there. I'm very surprised by the amount of snowflakeness we've already seen in the course of literally a couple weeks. All of it, and the idea that he's going to file these complaints and they're somehow not going to get out to the public, that they're all going to, I don't know what he's thinking. But it's nothing he clearly paid attention to when studying with anybody about the prison system. And maybe they don't teach it. Maybe they don't talk about what works and what doesn't in there. But like naming the folks off and calling out people for saying things like, the only we're going to be eating today is Kohbergers. Oh, it's this guy that said that. That also not going to pan out well for you, Bryan, behind bars. But he didn't seem to take any or read any books on this before going into his cell on how to survive.
Well, I would say this, and from the beginning, people in academia, they study, myself, criminology, right? Anybody who studies criminal justice at all levels, academically, you got it down.
Yeah.
you know the rules, what's in place. It's only when you get that real life practical experience of going to jail and going to prison, and I mean even visiting there, that you get a feel for how horrible it is going to be. And I think he's book smart on the topic, and because jail is so different from prison. Yeah. And as a practical matter, he is not coping well.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting because a lot of people will say, prison is better than jail. Jail is better than prison. It probably depends on where you're at, but it seems like Kohberger kind of made jail a little bit better than prison, or at least maybe he had more more protections there or more freedoms, to take hour-long showers and not worry about things entering orifices, things of that nature. Now it's suddenly things are getting real in the prison.
Well, when he was at the Latah County Jail, I mean, that was Shangri-La. It really was. Big cell, television, iPad, connectivity to the world, vegan diet. It was unbelievable. Ashley Banfield did a good job of just breaking down how spoiled he was in that environment. But then, they got the great idea to move to Ada County, which I will continue to say was one of the biggest mistakes they made in this case, at least for, Bryan Kohberger. And things changed. It got a little tougher. This is so different if you've been in prison before. I mean, those doors closed, the smell of that place, the inmates, these inmates are the worst of the worst. They could give a crap, and they can stay up for hours and berate him over those vents.
This is Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski. Here now, Tony Brueski.
When you sift through the Papa Roger mystery, the details that stick in your throat aren't just the tone of the arguments. It's the precision. Out of all the noise online in those weeks after the murders, one account managed to predict the exact kind of weapon, talk about a sheath before it was ever made public, and raise questions that lined up almost word for word with the criminology survey behind Bryan Kohberger that he himself had been discussing at DeSales. And we're going to break all of this down for you today with Jennifer Coffindaffer. This is a new creepy correlation that we are pointing out here for the first time. It's not a coincidence, it's a mirror. And that's what makes this part of the story so hard to shake. If Papa Roger wasn't Kohberger, then we're left staring at someone who paralleled his work, his thought process, his language, his profile picture. Nobody knew any of these things yet, keep in mind. We're talking about a guy who, like Kohberger, argued with everyone in sight, obsessed over providing or proving himself right, and leaned into this condescending academic tone. He wasn't just posting theories. He was posturing, performing, fighting to establish dominance again. It's not casual. It's someone with a very specific personality type, and it just so happens to be the same one every student, professor, and former acquaintance now describes when they talk about Kohberger. But here's where it gets murky. The timeline of when Papa Roger disappeared, the copycat accounts that sprung up using the same profile picture, and the constant churn of speculation all muddy the water. Law enforcement says flatly it wasn't him. Yet when you lay the survey questions next to Papa Roger's forum prompts, the overlap is almost laughably on the nose. Why pick this victim over others? Why this house, this entrance point, this scene? It's like watching someone rehearse their own crime through anonymous posts. And if it wasn't him, then we've got another question altogether. Who out there was shadowing this case so closely, with such unsettling accuracy, that their words can't be separated from the alleged killers? Because that's not a garden variety internet sleuth. That's someone with skin in the game. So, Jennifer, let's pull this apart. When you look at these eerie parallels, the sheath prediction, the linguistic quirks, the copycat confusion, do they convince you that Papa Roger was Kohberger all along, or do you still see enough gaps in the digital trail to keep the door cracked open that this was someone else entirely? Let's get into it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I tried to actually, this is how far down the Roger rabbit hole I got.
Yeah.
I started looking at punctuation.
Okay.
Because different people punctuate very differently. Like, as an example, I often don't punctuate.
Mm-hmm.
I purposefully don't punctuate only when I'm on Twitter, because I don't want to punctuate. I want the person to wonder, is it a question mark? Is it a exclamation point? You can read into that whatever you will, that statement I'm making, right? So I purposely often don't punctuate. When he writes, he sometimes punctuates and sometimes doesn't. So I couldn't even get a read on that.
Yeah.
I thought I'd be able to. He used the word dolt, D-O-L-T, which isn't used very often, which is like a dumbass.
Yeah, adult.
Dolt.
Yeah.
And that's another sort of, I consider it something in academia, right? Very well-educated people sort of use the word dolt. I always found that interesting, and I tried to find it in all his other writings. I couldn't. I found it interesting. He wrote, "The killer lived alone." This is very early on. Again, back to those eerie things. He also wrote, "Breaking news, a white car is driving somewhere in the Americas," which I thought was interesting, always trying to deviate away from the white car, which he knew he was very much linked to. And as we're seeing come out now, everything he did after he realized, oh my gosh, they're focusing on the white car.
Yeah.
Like the searches that have been revealed recently.
Yeah. And we are now seeing just how paranoid he was getting right up until the point where he was arrested on that December 29th at his parents' home, searching terms like wiretap. And this is another one that gets me. Psychopaths paranoid. So he's literally sitting there identifying as a psychopath, I guess, at this moment in time, or he just wants to join the club and, emulate what they do. What do psychopaths do when they might be getting caught? How do they act when they're paranoid? It's another very mechanical aspect to Kohberger that really makes him feel not human, and just following the script of something. Were you surprised at just his level of paranoia right when they came in on him? Or, obviously it shows a level of some self-awareness that he's not unstoppable, because he was watching this stuff like a hawk.
Yeah, no, he was so paranoid. And I agree with you. The fact he labeled himself, not as an incel, as a psychopath, at least in what they found. Again, I always caution, because they found so little, Tony. Do you think that, he only searched a few things? No, he probably searched hundreds of things. Just think how many research in a day. But he did such a great job covering it all up.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, look at these gems here to show how paranoid he really was, and how he identified, I think, was really important. I think he knew he was a psychopath from this.
Yeah, it just makes you wonder, like, how... I wonder what that feels like to because most psychopaths aren't necessarily in tune with their psychopathy. They're kind of just like, they just keep going and doing their thing. They don't lean into it. But it seems like Kohberger's like, yeah, I'm psycho, and this is what I'm going to search for. And does that strike you as odd that he's literally identifying as a psychopath?
No, because I think many of them do. It's just in their ages, or everything we have evidentiary-wise on them, we didn't see them talk about it. And that's what I always said about Papa Roger. For me, why I found it so intriguing was because this was the modern era of BTK writing to the Wichita Eagle and Beacon or Cake TV, right? This was taunting and taunting law enforcement and the public at an all new level. And that's why I thought this was so interesting. But I just don't think it's him, only because law enforcement says that it isn't. But man, I want to see the evidence.
Then who is it?
We don't have any.
Who could it possibly be if it's not him? I guess would be my question to you.
Yeah, well, I think law enforcement has determined that. I really do.
Yeah.
I just think they haven't released it. I think for them to come out and not just say, listen, we never developed that, or we don't know. They're so sure of themselves. So it makes me think they've identified that. Are
they, or do they just use the wrong terms when they presented this? That's my maybe you use a little too overconfident of terms or saying it and I'm like, okay, cool. I just love to know more. And if they do know who it is, why would they not? I suppose there's privacy issues there if it is someone else to say, hey, it was you. Not everyone may feel happy about that, their identity being thrown out there, but I don't know, but they haven't said that either. They haven't said we know who it is. They just said we don't think it's him.
Well, we know early on they did think it was him.
Mm-hmm.
There was source information out there. Dateline talked about it. There was definite source information, and we know they had a great source that said it was Papa Roger. This was in the earlier time frame, right? And then we know follow up from that. We now see the documents. I mean, I'm posting these documents where they are doing a deep dive on Papa. So even law enforcement was convinced it was Papa.
Yeah.
And then now they're saying it's not. I want to see those documents that say, even if they black it out, redact it, where's the one that says, based on this review, because the review we saw was so weak, it didn't really say anything.
Yeah.
I want to see the one that says the IP address associated with all the Papa Roger postings are this person redacted.
Yeah. Something. Just something. Yeah. It's the mystery that at this point doesn't really matter all that much. But what matters to me about it is I feel like they're missing something. I feel like, I don't know. I feel like they needed to dig deeper on that one. And maybe that's something we should be paying more attention to in the future in the modern age of these monsters like this is, it's not the Wichita Eagle. We're not just going to get the data off of the disc that he did at his church in Park City. We got to dig deeper into these sort of characters, even when there is a VPN. Maybe there needs to be some more I don't know. I don't know what you could do to possibly outmaneuver folks like this. If they want to be anonymous, they want to get their message out there, they're going to find ways to do it without being tracked. I just feel like we hit this brick wall and didn't dig deeper to see what's behind the brick wall, because I think there's more to it. It's a facade of a brick wall. It's one of those thin rock ones where it just falls away and it's like, oh, there's something back here. Here's what this conversation underscores. We're not just dealing with a murder case. We're dealing with the first big test case of how digital anonymity intersects with real-world violence. Papa Roger, whoever he was, became a character in this story because he blurred the lines between speculation and confession. He didn't just talk about the case, he seemed to foreshadow it, echo it, and maybe even live it in real time. And that's the part that still gnaws at me. If you lined up all the posts Papa Roger made with the latter revelations about Kohberger, the overlaps are damning. The survey-like questions, a fixation on the sheath, the combative tone, the desperation to dominate. If it looks like him, argues like him, and thinks like him, why shouldn't people believe it was him? But the catch is, law enforcement's denial forces us into the limbo. If we take them at their word, then the haunting alternative is that someone else was inside that forum, playing puppet master with uncanny insight. Maybe they were just guessing brilliantly. Maybe they had access to whispers of information that hadn't gone public yet. Or maybe they were just another predator, one we still don't know. What sticks with me is the gap between we don't know and it wasn't him. That overconfidence, that insistence, creates the very vacuum conspiracy theories thrive in. If authorities had said, we couldn't prove it, we'd still have questions, but at least the door would be open. Instead, by shutting it with finality, they made the ghost of Papa Roger even more compelling. And that's what this segment really highlights. Digital footprints don't vanish just because someone logs off. They linger, they echo, and they demand scrutiny. Whether Papa Roger was Kohberger or not almost matters less than the fact that someone out there, someone real, used that mask to stir chaos, provoke fear, and leave a trail of unanswered questions. The takeaway for me? We can't afford to dismiss these online personas as noise. They're not just chatter. They're windows into psychology and sometimes in pathology. And until we see the hard evidence law enforcement uses to eliminate Kohberger from that handle, Papa Rogers remains the riddle inside the case. Not solved, not dismantled, just lingering, like a shadow that refuses to disappear. Tell me your thoughts in the comments section on YouTube. If you're not there already, search Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski, and you will find us there. Be sure to press subscribe while you're there as well. Until next time, I'm Tony Brueski. We'll talk again real soon.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Brueski and the Hidden Killers podcast.